Okay, I'm gonna make a short introduction, 2-3 minutes, and after we can start, I'm gonna make it in Greek. Λοιπόν, σας καλωσορίζω εκ μέρους της αντιουσιαστικής κίνησης Θεσσαλονίκης στη δεύτερη εκδήλωσή μας πάνω στην κατάσταση στην Αμερική. Στην πρώτη συνομιλήσαμε με τον Μάρκ Μπρέι, ακτιβιστή και συγγραφέα του βιβλίου Αντίφα, και τον Ασάντι Άλστον, ακτιβιστή και πρώην μέλος του Black Panther Party και του Black Liberation Party. Σήμερα θα συζητήσουμε με τον Νίκο Georgiades, έναν από τους συνιδρυτές της ανεξάρτητης μιντιακής κολεκτίβας Unicorn Riot. Αρχικά να πούμε ότι βρισκόμαστε 2 μήνες και 3 μέρες από τη δολοφονία του George Floyd από αστυνομικούς στις 25 Μαΐου στη Minneapolis. 2 μήνες και 3 μέρες μετά από μια έκρηξη οργής, συσσωρευμένης συλλογικής καταπίεσης αιώνων για τον αφροαμερικάνικο πληθυσμό και μια κραυγή από όλους όσους πνίγονται μέσα στον αμερικάνικο χωρίς ανθρώπινο πρόσωπο καπιταλισμό. 28 νεκροί διαδηλωτές, $500 εκατομμύρια καταστροφή περιουσιών και 4% των Αμερικανών να νομιμοποιούν κοινωνικά το κάψιμο ενός αστυνομικού τμήματος. Αριθμοί για μια εξέγερση που αποτελεί για μία ακόμη φορά την ερώτηση, κινούμενοι σε αχαρτογράφητα νερά ψάχνοντας απαντήσεις. 2 μήνες έκρηξης που δεν δείχνουν να βρίσκουν διέξοδο στην ανάθεση και στην επιλογή ανάμεσα σε ρεπουμπλικάνους και δημοκρατικούς, δηλαδή σε Γιάννη και Γιαννάκη, σε Τραμπ και Μπάιντεν, σε έναν άσπρο ρατσιστή καταγγελίες για σεξουαλικές παρενοχλήσεις και έναν άσπρο ρατσιστή εκατομμυριούχο με 8 αντίστοιχες καταγγελίες. Αν είχε κερδίσει ο Μπέρνι το χρήσμα των δημοκρατικών, ο οποίος παρουσιάζεται στο πολιτικό φάσμα των ΗΠΑ σαν ακροαριστερός, τα πράγματα θα ήταν αλλιώς. Αν ίσχυε βέβαια αυτό ότι είναι ακροαριστερός, θα είχε ήδη δολοφονηθεί από το Αμερικανικό κράτος, όπως σωστά έχει σημειωθεί. Ο κεντρός Μπέρνι θα αποτελούσε μια πολύ καλύτερη βαλβίδα αποσυμβίωσης προς την κυβερνητική διαχείριση. Ανταυτού, το μπαμ έγινε και δεν περιορίστηκε κυρίως τοπικά, όπως σε πολλές από τις εξεγέρσεις του παρελθόντος, με αφορμή και με λόγο τις φυλετικές διακρίσεις, βλέπε Λος Άντζελες και Φέργκιουσον, αλλά οι αιστείες του εξαπλώθηκαν σε όλες τις πολιτείες της Αμερικής, 40% των περιφερειών της, καθιστώντας το Black Lives Matter το μεγαλύτερο κίνημα για τα πολιτικά δικαιώματα στην ιστορία των ΗΠΑ. Μέσα στον Ιούνιο υπολογίζεται πως περίπου 20 δηλώσει. Η πλειοψηφία τους κάτω των 35, νέοι άνθρωποι που βλέπουν να ακυρώνονται εκδοχές του μέλλοντός τους, τόσο πολυεπίπεδα, τόσο επιθετικά και όλο και πιο επιταχυμένα. Τα αιτήματά τους, τα πάντα. Ό,τι χρειάζεται για να τρίξει στη θέμελα το τερατώδες οικοδόμημα των ΗΠΑ. Στο δρόμο προς μια κοινωνική αυτονομία. Το ίδιο το κίνημα τα είχε συνοψίσει σε 6 αιτήματα. Όπως λένε, για να τελειώσει ο πόλεμος προς τους μαύρους ανθρώπους. Πρώτον, αποζημιώσεις για όσα έχουν υποφέρει στο παρόν. Στόπ στις χρηματοδοτήσεις των θεσμών που εγκληματοποιούν και φυλακίζουν μαύρους ανθρώπους. Επενδύσεις στην παιδεία, στην υγεία και στην ασφάλεια των μαύρων ανθρώπων. Οικονομική ισότητα για όλους και αναδιάρθρωση της κοινωνίας θα διασφαλιστεί συλλογική ιδιοκτησία μέσα στις κοινότητες. Έλεγχος της κοινότητας τις πολιτικές που μας επηρεάζουν. Ανεξάρτητη μαύρη εξουσία και αυτεξουσία σε όλες τις πτυχές της κοινωνίας. 2 μήνες και 3 μέρες μετά από τη δολοφονία, η ροή των ειδήσεων από την Αμερική έχει μειωθεί αισθητά. Το viral effect στα mainstream media έληξε και γιατί άλλωστε τα χρηματοδοτούμενα και καθοδηγούμενα από τους πάνω media να καλύψουν ένα κίνημα που παλεύει για τα πάντα και στο πλευρό του έχει όλο το δίκαιο του κόσμου. Πόσο μάλλον να αποκαλύψουν την ακραία καταστολή που λαμβάνει χώρα από την Αμερικάνικη πολεμική μηχανή, που έχει στραφεί από την αρχή στον εσωτερικό εχθρό, με όλη της τη δύναμη. Lockdown, tanks, πάνωπλες ειδικές δυνάμεις, σαν να βγήκαν από πώς θα αποκαλύπτει video game. Τελευταίες έχουμε όλες τις σκηνές από το Portland. Στις οθόνες μας φτάνουν εικόνες δυστοπικές, που για μία ακόμη φορά επιβεβαιώνουν ότι το μέλλον είναι εδώ και είναι δυσίωνο. Σήμερα είναι μαζί μας η Unicorn Riot και ο Νίκο Georgiades για να μας μεταδώσουν μια εικόνα από το δρόμο. Πώς συνεχίζονται οι διαδηλώσεις και το κίνημα Black Lives Matter, τι συμβαίνει με την καταστολή, αλλά και την κατάσταση ειδικά στη Μινεάπολη, τον τόπο δολοφονίας του George Floyd και έδρα των Unicorn Riot. So, hi Niko, and thank you for us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you so much. My name is Niko Georgiades. My extended family goes from Greece, so that's hence my name. It's really an honor to be invited by Greek comrades as yourself, so thank you. Standing right here in front of this is the 3rd precinct. This was burnt up, not burnt down here in Minneapolis. I'm part of Unicorn Riot, and Unicorn Riot makes basically independent media. We are an independent media organization that tries to amplify the voices of those that are unheard, but also bring context to social and environmental struggles.
Γεια σας, είμαι ο Νίκος Γεωργιάδης, είμαι από τους Unicorn Riot, είμαι εδώ στη Μινεάπολη. Ευχαριστώ πολύ τους συντρόφους στην Ελλάδα που με κάλεσαν να μιλήσω. Τώρα πίσω το κτίριο, το τμήμα που κάηκε στη Μινεάπολη. I think that's it.
Okay.
Sorry. Και το όνομά του λέει ότι είναι Νίκος Γεωργιάδης επειδή η οικογένειά του είναι από Ελλάδα ή προηγούμενες γενιές.
All right. So yeah, basically, we were out here. We watched this happen. We watched this sort of get burnt up. We were live during it. Going to try to bring some experience that we had here. Let you all know from a media perspective, but also from a personal perspective, sort of what I saw happen. You see right here, there's burnt out buildings everywhere. And so there's a lot happening over here. It's good to bring you all here to this spot.
Okay. Λέει, ήμασταν εδώ την ώρα που συνέβη, που κάηκε το τμήμα. Εδώ μπορείτε να δείτε γύρω-γύρω πολλά καμένα κτίρια, όπως αυτό που δείχνει τώρα. Και ήθελα να σας δώσω μια εικόνα από τον δρόμο που γίνανε όλα αυτά.
Yeah, should I just start with a sort of a presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So to give a quick rundown of Minneapolis, 2015, late 2014, the Black Lives Matter movement started, and it came to Minneapolis. There was some protests. They took over the freeways, and then in 2015, things ramped up a little bit.
Μας λέει ότι το 2013 στη Μινεάπολη ξεκίνησαν οι Black Panthers και το Black Lives Matter, sorry. Το Black Lives Matter και ότι υπήρχαν πολλές διαμαρτυρίες σε αυτοκινητοδρόμους που τους κλείσανε, οι οποίες σκορπώθηκαν μέχρι το 2015.
And so the action started to ramp up. There was an autonomous action, which hadn't really been happening. It was mostly organized protests. To where you had a leader and you had to listen to the marshals. An autonomous action happened. People burnt a flag in front of the 1st precinct, and that was 2015. So that was sort of the start of autonomous actions in the city.
Λέει ότι το 2015 άρχισαν να γίνονται πολλές πιο αυτόνομες δράσεις που δεν είχαν ηγέτες και ήταν οργανωμένες από τα πάνω, όπως συνηθίζαμε και τότε. Και όλο αυτό ξεκίνησε πιο πολύ να γίνεται από το 2015 και μετά.
In 2015 later, Jamar Clark was shot in the face by police. He was unarmed. He was killed. There was 18 days occupation outside of the 4th precinct. This is the 3rd precinct. This is the South Minneapolis. The 4th precinct is over North Minneapolis. And there was a lot of protests. As I said, 18 days. They created their own community out there. There was security, there was kitchens, there was food, there was tents, and it was winter time.
It was a, sorry? Huh? It was a?
Winter. Yep, it was the winter time.
Okay. Λοιπόν, μας είπε ότι κάποια στιγμή τότε το 2015 προς το τέλος πυροβολήθηκε κάποιος στο πρόσωπο και μετά είχαν 18 μέρες κατάληψη στο 4ο αστυνομικό τμήμα, όχι σε αυτό που βλέπουμε, που κράτησε 18 μέρες και είχαν μέσα στο χειμώνα, είχαν κάνει κουζίνες αντίσκηνα, ήταν πολύ οργανωμένοι μέσα η κατάληψη.
The next big action was Philando Castile was killed by police in St. Paul area. People went to the governor's residence to ask the governor for justice. So first, it's 2015, they went to the police precinct, asked for the police to charge the officers. this time, 2016, they went to the governor's residence for 23 days.
Και το 2016, ένα χρόνο μετά που υπήρχε πάλι ένα αντίστοιχο περιστατικό, πήγαν στο σπίτι του κυβερνήτη και κάτσανε 23 μέρες κάναν κατάληψη εκεί πέρα.
No justice happened in any of those cases. There was multiple other police killings and multiple other protest movements, and no justice ever occurred for the victims.
Δεν αποδόθηκε ποτέ δικαιοσύνη. Υπήρχαν πάρα πολλές περιπτώσεις βίας και πολύ σκοτεινή οικονομία, αλλά δεν αποδόθηκε ποτέ δικαιοσύνη.
The police in 2016 used social media to as surveillance tactic to target and arrest protest organizers.
Το 2006 η αστυνομία χρησιμοποίησε κοινωνικά μέσα κοινωνικής δικτύωσης για να στοχοποιήσει διαδηλωτές και να τους συλλάβει.
This helped to quell organizing around police terror issues and sort of put people in the background instead of continuing the movement.
I missed the start, sorry.
Okay, yeah, yep. So this, the police surveillance, it helped to stop the movement, and it made people sort of go do work in the background.
Λέει ότι αυτή η επιτήρηση της αστυνομίας έκανε τον κόσμο να σταματήσει, είχε στο στόχο να κάνει τον κόσμο να σταματήσει να ασχολείται με αυτό, οπότε πήγε λίγο προς, κινήθηκαν λίγο πιο πόδια.
So that was sort of the scene when, before George Floyd was killed. It was, you know, we had a lot of movement here, but no justice ever came. A white woman was killed, a very sort of rich white woman, and the killer was a Muslim, a black Muslim police officer. He got 10 years in prison, and her family got $20 million.
Λέει ότι ενώ υπήρχε όλο αυτό το σκηνικό μέχρι να σκοτωθεί ο Φλόιντ και πολλοί Αφροαμερικανοί σκοτώθηκαν, δεν αποδόθηκε ποτέ δικαιοσύνη, αλλά σε κάποιο σημείο σκοτώθηκε και μια λευκή γυναίκα που ήταν πολύ πλούσια και ο δράστης ήταν ένας μαύρος μουσουλμάνος αστυνομικός και σε αυτή την περίπτωση αυτός καταδικάστηκε σε 10 χρόνια φυλακή. Και how was the severance for her family?
20 million.
20 million, yep. Yep, and so, go ahead. Yeah, and so that backdrop is what allowed what we saw recently to happen. It was a lot of pent up anger and pent up rage towards the system that was not being fair continually.
Και όλος αυτός ο συγκεντρωμένος ο θυμός που συσσωρευότανε ήταν αυτό που όθησε την κατάσταση να γίνει εδώ πέρα, μια οργή που συσσωρευόταν συνεχώς και αφέθηκε τώρα αυτόν τον καιρό.
So George Floyd was killed about a mile away from here, maybe a mile to 3 miles away from here. This is the precinct where the officers employed him at. And when the people came here the day after he was murdered, is when everything sort of started around here. And I will say real quick before you do the translation that the vigil that moved into the march was organized by sort of leaders. But when the march came to the 3rd precinct, those leaders lost all control.
Okay. Λέει ότι ο George Floyd το σημείο που σκοτώθηκε ήταν 1 με 3 μίλια πιο πέρα, αλλά τον φέραν μετά σε αυτό το αστυνομικό τμήμα. Και την επόμενη μέρα που άρχισαν οι ταραχές από αυτό το σημείο ακριβώς, λέει ότι οι διοργανωτές και οι ηγέτες των διαδηλώσεων έχασαν απολύτως τον έλεγχο όταν πήγε η διαδήλωση εκεί πέρα, το πλήθος.
And so this in front of you is the 3rd precinct. That's the fence that surrounds it. And back there is the door that you can see. I don't know if you all can see it, but it's in the middle of there, and it's sort of got a steel look on it. And that's one of the police doors that got breached in May 28th, 2020, 3 days into the uprising.
Αυτό είναι το τρίτο αστυνομικό τμήμα που το βλέπουμε τώρα πίσω από το φράχτη. Εδώ μας δείχνει πίσω την πόρτα που είναι από ατσάλι και στην οποία φτάσαν οι διαδηλωτές στις 3 μέρες των εξεγέρσεων, το Μάιο του 2020.
And so after, well, I'll bring it back real quick. I just wanted to show you, I wanted to show you the door, but bringing it back a day or two, we had basically, when people came here originally, the first day, there was no police outside. No police talked to anybody. There was police on the inside, but there was about 5,000 people that came straight to the precinct. The police left a dummy car. What that means is they sort of just left a police car in the middle of the alley, and that was to do two effects. One, to allow the protesters to have something to smash, and the other effect is if they smashed it, that was reason to use force on the protesters.
Τώρα λέει ήθελε απλά να μας δείξει την πόρτα, οπότε το πιάνουμε ξανά από την αρχή. Την πρώτη μέρα που γίνανε οι διαδηλώσεις, δεν είχε καθόλου αστυνομία έξω από το κτίριο, ήταν όλοι μέσα οι αστυνομικοί και είχαν αφήσει έξω μόνο ένα αυτοκίνητο, ένα περπατικό, το οποίο το άφησαν για δύο λόγους. Πρώτον, για να έχει ο κόσμος κάτι να σπάσει και να τους φύγει λίγο η ένταση. Και δεύτερο, γιατί έτσι θα είχαν λόγο μετά να παρέμβουν με τους ταραξίες που καταστρέφουν τη δημόσια περιουσία κλπ.
So, people that day, the first day, smashed the car. There was a lot of people telling them to stop, but they couldn't control them. This was the parking lot where all the police had their vehicles, and it got breached. After the parking lot got breached and a lot of their vehicles got smashed up, that's when the police reacted, and that's when everything sort of continued to spiral.
Λέει ότι σε αυτό το πάρκινγκ ήταν όλα τα αυτοκίνητα των αστυνομικών και στην αρχή όταν κάψαν εκείνο το ένα το αυτοκίνητο υπήρχε κόσμος που έλεγε στους διαδηλωτές μη το καίτε και λίγο συμμαζευτείτε, αλλά δεν είχαν κανέναν έλεγχο πάνω στο τι γινότανε. Και μετά κάποια στιγμή παραβιάστηκε και η πόρτα του πάρκινγκ, οπότε άρχισαν να σπάνε εκεί πολλά αυτοκίνητα και τότε κινητοποιήθηκε η αστυνομία και βγήκαν έτσι.
So there you can see that is the back of a trunk pack. That's a police trunk pack. And so that's just a remnant of some of their equipment. Basically what we saw, oh yeah, go ahead with that one and then I'll continue.
Λέει ότι αυτό το που έδειξε ήταν από ένα από trunk, από το προπαγκάζ του περιπολικού, ναι, την καρότσα. Και τα αφήνει εκεί έξω.
And so people surrounded this place for days. Every single day, there was at least 1,000 people continually. At night, there was up to 10,000 people out here. The people in the front lines were usually having their hands up and they were practicing nonviolent tactics or peaceful tactics. And then the people in the backgrounds were actually throwing projectiles and throwing rocks and fireworks at the police.
Λέει ότι περικυκλώθηκε το κτίριο αυτό για μέρες. Ήταν περίπου 1.000 άτομα τη μέρα, τη νύχτα έφταναν τις 10.000. Οι περισσότεροι μπροστά ήταν οι ειρηνικοί διαδηλωτές και πιο μαχητικοί ήταν από πίσω που πετούσαν φωτοβολίδες και πέτρες και διάφορα.
The police had stationed themselves on top of the roofs and they were shooting at people with flashbangs and marker rounds, and they were all in the front of the area, as well as using this stoop to shoot at people.
What were they using? Can you show it to us?
No, I don't have any marker rounds on me, but there's, you know, they have flashbangs and then they have marker rounds, and the marker rounds are like less lethal munitions, and they're impact rounds. And so what they'll do is they'll chalk you with a chalk. So it usually has a color. The ones that they were using were green and orange and blue. So if they hit you with that, then they find you later, they know that you were targeted and then they can arrest you.
Ήταν στην ταράτσα η αστυνομική στη σκεπή και χτυπούσαν τους διαδηλωτές με κάποιο όπλο, δεν ξέρω πώς τα λένε εδώ, και αν τα έχουμε, τα οποία ταυτόχρονα είχαν σαν σοκ, σαν ηλεκτροσοκ, αλλά είχαν και χρώματα έτσι ώστε να μπορούν μετά να σε βρουν.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. You done? Okay. People were using this parking lot. So we're talking about spatial use. When we talk about spaces and areas of spaces, this whole parking lot was used by the community to organize, and they had all these roadways to actually utilize to go after this precinct. So the way this precinct was set up, it allowed the community to actually more beneficially attack it.
Η κοινότητα χρησιμοποιούσε αυτό το πάρκινγκ σαν μέρος ώστε να συγκεντρωθούν και να αναδιοργανωθούν και χρησιμοποιούσαν και όλους αυτούς τους δρόμους εδώ που βλέπουμε. Οπότε ήταν πολύ εύκολο να περικυκλωθεί το τμήμα, το οποίο ήταν αποκομμένο στην ουσία από όλο τον κόσμο που ήταν γύρω-γύρω.
And so with people using the parking lots, a lot of these stores, they're corporate stores, Target, Cub Foods, Aldi, they were getting expropriated. They were getting, you know, all of their goods were being taken out of the stores, and a lot of it was ending up on the front lines for people who were protesting.
Και ταυτόχρονα πηγαίνανε σε πολύ μεγάλα μαγαζιά, όπως το Target και δεν θυμάμαι ποια άλλα, και παίρνανε πράγματα, απολωτριώνανε και τα είχαν μετά εκεί μπροστά, έτσι ώστε να είναι διαθέσιμα στους διαδηλωτές να τα πάρουν.
And then there was, like, the scene you see right now is nothing like it was, because there was literally a building right here. There was 2 buildings right here. There was a building right there. There was a big old condo complex coming up right there, and they all got lit on flames.
Η περιοχή που βλέπουμε τώρα δεν ήταν καθόλου έτσι. Είχε πολλά κτίρια στην απέναντι μεριά του δρόμου, τα οποία κάηκαν ολοσχερώς.
And so the people through the days, when the police would shoot at them with their projectiles, the people would move. And every time the police would shoot, the people moved off in different places, and they moved like with different groups, and different groups had set up different barricades. And you see, it's just like, this is the thought, this is abolish the police, right? But they have, you can see the remnants in the street where the barricades were burning still. And I'll bring you up to it.
Όσο γίνονταν αυτά και όσο οι αστυνομικοί πυροβολούσαν στον κόσμο με αυτά τα όπλα που λέγαμε πριν, οι άνθρωποι μετακινούνταν και πήγαιναν σε διαφορετικές ομάδες προς διαφορετικά μέρη και σε όλο αυτό το σημείο φτιάχνανε οδοφράγματα και όμενα και τώρα θα πάει να μας δείξει.
And so this is in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, obviously. And so people weren't working, people weren't going to school, people were unemployed. And so they were also very much able to come out to the protests.
Λέει ότι εκείνο τον καιρό πολλοί δεν πήγαιναν στη δουλειά, δεν πήγαιναν στο σχολείο, άλλοι ήταν άνεργοι, οπότε είχε πάρα πολύ κόσμο που πήγαινε στις διαμαρτυρίες.
So this massive space right here was a huge building that was getting built. Some say it was a condo building, some say it was just an apartment building, but the sense of it was that it was gentrification, and the gentrified property was one of the first to get burnt up.
Εδώ σε αυτό το σημείο χτιζόταν ένα κτίριο, κάποιοι λέγανε ότι ήταν διαμερίσματα, άλλοι καταστήματα. Το σίγουρο ήταν ότι ήταν ένα από τα κτίρια που χρησιμοποιούνταν για τον εξυγχρονισμό της περιοχής gentrification και ήταν από τα πρώτα που κάηκαν.
So even off in the distance, there's more buildings. I think there was $500 million worth of damage to buildings. In the first 2 or 3 days, or the first 2 days, I should say, in the first 2 days, it was only corporate institutions that were getting hit with looting, or they were getting hit with any kind of vandalism. It was mostly the corporate institutions.
Υπολογίζεται ότι οι ζημιές στα κτίρια που έγινε όλο αυτό το διάστημα ήταν κοντά στα $500 εκατομμύρια. Και στην αρχή αυτά που χτυπούσαν ήταν κυρίως μεγάλες εταιρείες.
And so there's a, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
και υπήρχε απαλωτρίωση στα προϊόντα τους.
There's a few banks around here, and they were also ransacked, and everything was stolen from the banks, as well as the ATMs. You know, you all know what an ATM is, right? So the ATMs, they have a lot of security in them, but people used hacksaws for days to try to get to the money in the ATM.
Επίσης, επιτέθηκαν σε τράπεζες και σε ATM και πάρα πολλές μέρες προσπαθούσαν, παρότι έχουν πολύ ισχυρή ασφάλεια τα ATM, προσπαθούσαν επί μέρες να τα σπάσουν και να πάρουν τα χρήματα.
So what all that looked like, though, was people were attacking the precinct, and there was tons of people everywhere else, and they were moving off and making barricades. They were moving off and taking the police away from protecting the precinct. And it was like a coordinated effort, but it wasn't specifically organized.
Αυτό το διάστημα υπήρχε πάρα πολλοί κόσμος που προσπαθούσε να επιτεθεί στο τμήμα. Και ταυτόχρονα υπήρχαν ομάδες που έφευγαν πιο πέρα, άλλες κάναν οδοφράγματα, άλλες έφευγαν πιο πέρα για να απομακρύνουν στην ουσία τους αστυνομικούς από το τμήμα, να μην είναι εκεί να το φυλάνε, και φαινόταν σαν να είναι πολύ οργανωμένο αυτό, αλλά στην ουσία δεν ήταν οργανωμένο από κάπου.
A lot of the people that we saw on the front lines were youth. There were young people that weren't typically in movements before this. They were just living their life, and then when they saw the snuff film of George Floyd's killing, it prompted them to be in the streets.
Πολλοί από αυτούς που συμμετείχαν σε αυτές τις διαδηλώσεις ήταν νεολαίοι, που μέχρι τότε δεν είχαν και συμμετοχή ιδιαίτερα σε κινήματα, απλά ζούσαν τη ζωή τους, και με το που είδαν αυτό με το Floyd άρχισαν να συμμετέχουν στις διαμαρτυρίες.
And so when we look at sort of how this happened, where the police left their precinct, they literally left the precinct and they let the people take it over. The people moved the protest down the street to the next precinct, which is a few miles down. And sort of that's when, the day after that, is when the National Guard came.
Κάποια στιγμή οι αστυνομικοί άφησαν το τμήμα, το άφησαν για να το παρικυκλώσει ο κόσμος. Και πήγανε λίγο πιο κάτω στο 4ο, και εκείνη τη στιγμή που άρχισε να πηγαίνει και οι διαδηλωτές άρχισαν να πηγαίνουν προς το άλλο το τμήμα, το 4ο, ήρθε την επόμενη μέρα η εθνοφρουρά.
So the political world here in Minneapolis is really progressive, and they're really liberal. A lot of the city council members had been at the 4th precinct protesting for justice for Jamar Clark, as I mentioned earlier. And we have a mayor who's really progressive, and we have, you know, commissioners and other such politicians who are progressive.
Στην Μινεάπολη, στη συγκεκριμένη περιοχή, είναι αρκετά προοδευτική η πολιτική ηγέτης εκεί πέρα, και ο κυβερνήτης και ο δήμαρχος, και κάποιοι από αυτούς ήταν και στο 4ο τμήμα σε διαδηλώσεις, σε διαμαρτυρίες.
And so that's the backdrop. We also have a black police chief, and this chief grew up in the community, and he also had sued the department for racial discrimination and won. So he sued the own department that he's the chief of now, and he's won before from racial discrimination.
Και ο διευθυντής εκεί στο αστυνομικό, όχι στο τμήμα, the chief of the police, you mean in the whole Minneapolis? Ναι. Ο αρχηγός στην Μινεάπολη είναι μαύρος και έχει μηνύσει στο παρελθόν το τμήμα για ρατσιστική συμπεριφορά και κέρδισε. Οπότε, ναι, υπάρχει όλο αυτό το κλίμα εκεί πέρα.
And so I say all that because it matters, because everybody says, you know, if you go vote, you will change these things won't happen. But people have voted. The people tried the 4th precinct. They tried the governor's residence. They lit the 3rd precinct on fire. They got charges finally for the officers.
Λέει, τα λέω αυτά γιατί έχουν σημασία, γιατί ο κόσμος σου λέει ότι το ότι ψηφίζεις μετράει. Οι άνθρωποι ψήφισαν για όλους αυτούς που είναι και είναι και φιλελεύθεροι σε αυτές τις θέσεις και πήγανε και για διαμαρτυρία στο σπίτι του κυβερνήτη και
You good? Okay. So sorry about that if I jumped over you. But the people do not trust that those charges will stick. They do not trust that change will happen. The people had demanded abolishment of the police and a different thing, defunding of the police. Neither of those seems to be likely at this point.
Λέω ότι ο κόσμος δεν εμπιστεύεται ότι θα λύνουν οι κατηγορίες, δεν εμπιστεύεται ότι θα αλλάξει κάτι. Έχουν ζητήσει δύο πράγματα. Ένα, την κατάργηση της αστυνομίας και ένα, το να μειωθεί η χρηματοδότηση προς την αστυνομία, αλλά δεν πιστεύουν ότι τίποτα από αυτά, ότι τίποτα δεν θα γίνει.
And part of that is very frustrating for a lot of local people because the local politicians who are progressive, they all swore that they would work to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
Και αυτό είναι πολύ απογοητευτικό για τους κατοίκους της περιοχής, γιατί όλοι αυτοί οι προοδευτικοί πολιτικοί είχαν υποσχεθεί ότι θα αποδυναμώσουν την αστυνομία. Θα τη διαλύσουν, θα την αποκλείσουν.
And so when it comes to actual change, we had the park board. They said they don't want anything to do with the police early in July. We had the University of Minnesota. They don't want anything to do with the Minneapolis police. Minneapolis public schools, they got the police out of the schools.
Οπότε σε ό,τι έχει να κάνει με αυτό, πάρα πολλοί φορείς είπαν ότι δεν θέλουμε τη σχέση με την αστυνομία της Μινεάπολης. Το είπαν σχολεία, το είπε το πανεπιστήμιο, ότι εμείς δεν έχουμε.
But that happened in early July, but they've all basically gone back on that. The park police, the Minneapolis Parks is using the Minneapolis police, even though they said they weren't. The city council decided to only take out $1.5 million out of $193 million police budget.
Αυτά γίνανε στις αρχές Ιουλίου. Έκτοτε τίποτα από αυτά δεν συνέβη. Χρησιμοποιούν κανονικά την αστυνομία όλοι αυτοί. Και παρότι είπαν ότι θα μειώσουν τη χρηματοδότηση, κόψανε $1,5 εκατομμύριο από τα 193 εκατομμύρια που δίνουν.
And that all matters because the people have been looking and pushing for change. And right now, 2 months after one of the most momentous uprisings in the history of America, in the most progressive city, it doesn't look like change is coming for a lot of the community.
Και αυτό έχει σημασία γιατί ο κόσμος περίμενε μια αλλαγή. Είμαστε 2 μήνες μετά από την πιο μεγάλη εξέγερση σε μια από τις πιο προοδευτικές πόλεις των ΗΠΑ και παρόλα αυτά δεν φαίνεται να αλλάζει τίποτα.
And so that's sort of like the synopsis. Basically, people came together, showed how much power they have, expressed also their rage, and it seems like right now the government has done a lot to quell and a lot to stop and to use counterinsurgency tactics to stop the movement.
Και έτσι φαίνεται ότι οι άνθρωποι συσπυρώθηκαν πάρα πολύ μαζί, δείξαν ότι έχουν πολύ δύναμη όταν είναι όλοι μαζί, εξέφρασαν την οργή τους πάρα πολύ έντονα, αλλά παρόλα αυτά η κυβέρνηση και η εξουσία απλά χρησιμοποίησαν τακτικές έτσι ώστε να εξομαλύνουν αυτή την κατάσταση και να σταματήσουν τον κόσμο από το να συμμετέχει στο κίνημα.
Real quick, I'll just point out this building in the beginning, this building had Gandhi Mahal. This was like an Indian restaurant. It had on the other side Addis Ababa, which is an Ethiopian restaurant. It had El Nuevo Rodeo, which is a Mexican nightclub. This stood the first 2 days. It had signs on it that said like minority owned or black owned. And there's a lot of people who have questions as to why these buildings actually got burnt up. And the only reason I bring that up is because it wasn't all, you know, people out here that were fighting against the police. Some people come out, as you probably have all experienced, in opportunist ways.
Τα κτίρια που μας έδειξε τα καμένα ήταν ένα ειδικό, ένα θετικό και εστιατόριο και ένα μεξικάνικο νυχτερινό κέντρο, τα οποία επίσης κάηκαν και απέναντι στα κτίρια αυτά εδώ τα σπίτια γράφει ότι είναι σπίτι μειονότητας. Και λέει μας τα δείχνει όλα αυτά για να μας δείξει ότι δεν ήταν απλά μόνο ο κόσμος που διαμαρτυρόταν, αλλά υπήρχε διάφορος κόσμος και ίσως κάποιοι το βρήκανε και σαν ευκαιρία γενική. Δεν ήταν κάτι δηλαδή που ήταν εύκολα ελέγξιμο.
And so as the state does, the state is using narratives that are saying that it wasn't Black Lives Matter that was out here, it was actually white supremacists and white anarchists who are Antifa terrorists who were the ones that were working together. So they're saying that Nazis were working with anti-fascists to burn the city. So that's just one of the narratives that they place out here. It's part of the things that we have to deal with when we're talking about media and narratives and why it was so important for Unicorn Riot to be live streaming during the uprising.
Αυτό που συνέβη εδώ είναι αυτό που πάντα κάνει το κράτος, ότι αλλάζει το αφήγημα. Και εδώ πέρα το αφήγημα ήταν από μεριάς του κράτους ότι ήταν τρομοκρατική οργάνωση αντίφα που τα κάναμε όλα αυτά και δεν ήταν ο κόσμος. Και ήταν μάλιστα λευκή supremacist της αρείας φυλής, της ανωτερότητας και ότι συνεργάζονταν αυτοί με τις αντίφα. Και, ναι, και αυτοί ήταν που κάνανε όλες αυτές τις ζημιές και γι' αυτό είναι τόσο σημαντικό, λέει, που ήμασταν εμείς Unicorn Riot και δείχναμε σε live streaming όλες τις διαδηλώσεις.
So, yeah, thank you. So basically that's sort of the presentation. I'm down to answer any questions. I have a million more things to say about it. Lastly, I just want to show that where those blue tarps are, that's where a pawn shop once stood, and a person died in the bottom of that pawn shop. The pawn shop got started on fire and the person was still in the basement, and so they passed away. They just found their body a few days ago.
Okay, λέει είναι το τελευταίο πράγμα που θα μας δείξει, έχει άλλα 1.000.000 πράγματα να πει. Αυτό ήταν ένα κατάστημα το οποίο κάηκε και ένας άνθρωπος τον οποίο βρήκανε μετά νεκρό, μετά από μέρες, μια-δύο μέρες. Τι?
So that person that died was one of two people that died from a pawn shop. The other pawn shop was Cadillac Pawn, and the owner of Cadillac Pawn, who's a white man from Wisconsin, came to his pawn shop while the riots were happening and shot out of his pawn shop into the street and killed a man.
Αυτό είναι δεύτερο στο δικαστήριο, ότι υπήρχε ένα δεύτερο που ο ιδιοκτήτης ήταν από το Wisconsin και όταν είδε κάποιον να βγαίνει από εκεί πέρα, το πυροβόλησε και τον κέρδισε.
And so I bring that up also because there was, not only was George Floyd killed by the police, but these were also deaths that were caused by the police, because essentially people wouldn't have been in the streets had George Floyd not been brutally murdered, and these riots would not have happened, and this uprising would not have happened. And so those are two lives. I don't know the person who was over here, but I know Calvin Horton, who was killed by the pawn shop owner. He had like 6 or 7 kids. Now they don't have a father because of the police actions, and the owner of the store who shot the person is not facing any charges.
Και λέει όλα αυτά έχουν σημασία γιατί στην ουσία όλα αυτά ξεκίνησαν λόγω της αστυνομικής βίας και αυτοί οι δύο θάνατοι. Αν δεν υπήρχε ο θάνατος του George Floyd, ο κόσμος θα κατέβαινε στους δρόμους, ούτε θα υπήρχαν οι φωτιές, ούτε όλα αυτά. Και λέει ότι ήξερε τον δεύτερο, αυτόν που σκοτώθηκε από τον ιδιοκτήτη του ενεχείρου δανειστηρίου, ο οποίος είχε 6-7 παιδιά.
And so this is the remnants. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the remnants of in the back of this building. You know, this is the scene that you saw so many car fires everywhere throughout the city during the uprising. The first few days, the police had chose to do a silent strike, which means that they're top of their brass. So the police chief union, he's a white supremacist. He was part of a white supremacist biker gang. His name is Bob Kroll, and he initiated what we think is he initiated probably a silent strike, meaning that any of the police officers that were working during those few days of the uprising, they weren't going to report to any calls.
Εδώ μας έδειξε τα απομεινάρια ενός αυτοκινήτου που κάηκε και εκείνες τις μέρες ο αρχηγός της αστυνομίας που είναι υπέρμαχος της Λευκής Φυλής εξέδωσε κάποιο είδους σιωπηρής απεργίας στους αστυνομικούς, το οποίο στην ουσία τους επέτρεπε οτιδήποτε κάνουν να μην χρειάζεται να το αναφέρουν πουθενά σε κανέναν ανώτερο.
So yeah, that's basically it, and you all can ask questions or go from here.
Αυτά ήτανε, μπορείτε να κάνετε ερωτήσεις.
Thanks a lot for your presentation and all the pictures. It was really good to see all of this with our own eyes. I guess what everybody is curious about now that the mainstream media don't cover the Black Lives Matter protests and we only get the pictures from alternative media like Unicorn Riot or others, is whether this whole uprising, not only Minneapolis, but in the whole of the US, is still going on somehow. I don't know, in full power or declined. What can you say about this?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Θα τη μεταφράσουμε για την ερώτησή μου. Ουσιαστικά ρωτάω τώρα που τα mainstream media δεν καλύπτουν τα γεγονότα στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, μπορεί να μας πει κατά πόσο η εξέγερση στην Μινεάπολη, αλλά και στις υπόλοιπες πολιτείες, ή αν έχει παρακμάσει και πόσο. Yeah, you can go on.
All right. First of all, I want to say that these stairs are the most steep stairs I've gone up since Greece. Last time I was in Greece, I went up some really steep stairs. And these, my God, they just go straight up. Okay, so yeah, man, it's you know, it's going on out west. Portland is holding it down still. There's still people in the streets everywhere all the time. You're right, the media is not covering it as much because it's not sensationalized as a riot or an uprising anymore. But also, the elements of the uprising have quelled.
Ναι, λέει, έχεις δίκιο ότι τα μίντια δεν το καλύπτουν πλέον όσο πριν. Ακόμα υπάρχουν διαμαρτυρίες και διαδηλώσεις και στο Portland κυρίως. Τα μίντια δεν το καλύπτουν γιατί δεν είναι τόσο έντονη αίσθηση, είναι πιο ομοιωμένα τα πράγματα.
Γιατί δεν το κατατάσσουν πλέον και σε αυτό το θεαματικό της εξέγερσης, ας πούμε, και τα επεισόδια. Κάπως έτσι.
And then, you know, here in Minneapolis, once the National Guard hit the streets, people were still protesting, but it lessened. And then more of the organizers that were sort of paid organizers, or like that's what they've been doing for the last 5 to 10 years, that's when they sort of took charge of the push, and they brought their own messages. defunding the police or abolishing the police or community control of the police. People have different ideas.
Και όταν ότι μειώθηκε η ένταση μειώθηκε η ένταση των διαδηλώσεων και μετά όταν ήρθε η εθνοφρουρά, τότε μπήκαν μπροστά πιο πολύ και οι ηγέτες των κινημάτων που ήταν σε επιπληρωμή, ας πούμε, σε διάφορα κόμματα και οργανώσεις. Και αυτοί ήταν που μετά έφεραν τη δικιά τους ατζέντα με το να παίρνει λιγότερη χρηματοδότηση η αστυνομία ή να καταργηθεί, να υπάρχει ναρκός έλεγχος. Μπήκανε σε μια φάση πιο πολύ της συζήτησης σε πολιτικό επίπεδο παρά της εξέγερσης.
So I will also say that the government has done, in the beginning, the government didn't know what to do. You could tell that they had no plans for stopping this. Well, I shouldn't say no plans for, they had no idea how to stop it right away. I'm weary as to say that they weren't ready because they seemed to be ready after they got ready, you know. But the uprising right now in Minneapolis, there's still actions happening all the time. But is it part of the uprising? It's hard for me to tell because it's part of the overall movement, but a lot of it has it's quelled the uprising thought process to where it went from radical imagining a world without police to now imagining how much money, can we just take 2 million out of the police budget and please put that into our community? So it's totally different thoughts.
Στην αρχή η κυβέρνηση δεν είχε ιδέα τι να κάνει και πώς να το χειριστεί, δεν είχαν κάποιο σχέδιο, δεν ήταν έτοιμοι. Αλλά πλέον, ενώ υπάρχουν διάφορες αιστείες, δεν είναι το ίδιο, είναι πιο μικρές και ο κόσμος έχει μπει σε μια κατάσταση διαπραγμάτευσης λίγο πολύ, το ότι, οκ, τι μπορούμε να κάνουμε, να κόψουμε 2 εκατομμύρια από την αστυνομία, ας κάνουμε αυτό.
So this is the post office right here. Another one of the tactics, you see all these trucks? These are actually post office trucks that are right here. You sort of tell that they're burnt out trucks. One of the ways that the government has started to find people, they've charged a lot of people with crimes, and some of the crimes they've charged them with are federal felonies because of fire. So the ATF, which is the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, along with the DEA and other alphabet soups here in America, have come together and they've all looked at a bunch of different footages. So people upload it from TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and they've busted dozens of people from their own videos that they put on the internet.
Η κυβέρνηση έχει απαγγείλει πάρα πολλές κατηγορίες σε κόσμο και κάποια από αυτά είναι και ομοσπονδιακά κακουργήματα, όπως π.χ. αυτό με τις φωτιές, με τους εκρησμούς και έχουν οργανωθεί διάφορα τμήματα της αστυνομίας και χρησιμοποιώντας τους λογαριασμούς των διαδηλωτών σε TikTok, Facebook, Instagram κλπ. Από τα βίντεο που ανέβαζαν, τους στοχοποιεί και τους απαγγέλει κατηγορίες.
So, you know, it's just threats now. It's people are threatened. People are scared that they're going to get charged with crimes that, you know, just from being at the 3rd precinct, some people are scared. But then there's other people who have lost their fear. As we see in Portland with the federal agents, now people are fighting back against federal agents. So there's layers of fear that are getting ripped away. And I think it's really important to really acknowledge that and to really realize that the layers of fear happen even in Minneapolis, where can we go this extra step? What if we break this window? What happens? And there was people there who didn't care. And so that's how it happened, where you have people de-arresting people from getting arrested by the feds in Portland. And the only reason why is because people are losing their fear.
Μας λέει ότι ο κόσμος στη Μινεάπολη γενικά είναι αρκετά φοβισμένος και με όλη αυτή τη στοχοποίηση έχουν καταφέρει να τρομάξουν πολύ κόσμο. Παρ' όλα αυτά, αυτό που βλέπουν ότι υπάρχουν διάφορα επίπεδα στο φόβο, τα οποίο π.χ. στο Portland αυτές τις μέρες δεν έχουν τόσο ισχύο. Ο κόσμος ξεπερνάει τους φόβους, κατευθείαν και στους ομοσπονδιακούς πράκτορες και μπορεί να αποσυλλάβουν κάποιον με το που τον έχουν συλλάβει. Εδώ έγραφε ότι πού είναι το ταχυδρομείο μου. Το ταχυδρομείο το είδαμε λίγο πριν, ήταν καμένο με όλα τα φορτηγάκια του για τα γράμματα. Οπότε το παιχνίδι παίζεται εκεί, στο κατά πόσο ξεπερνάνε το φόβο τους οι άνθρωποι για να αντεπιτεθούν.
Yeah, so basically, you still have the idea around abolishing the police is something really that really radical people have been talking about for a long time, but it now hit the mainstream. So to have these conversations is still super important because this is a very like sort of a mainstream place right here. But it's a really good bookstore, and if they have abolished the police on a lot of these buildings, that means a lot of people are seeing these things. And that plays into the part of the psyche of people to understand that there might be something different and there might be an alternative.
Αυτό το graffiti που λέει καταργήστε την αστυνομία είναι σε ένα πολύ... Υπάρχει σε πάρα πολλά κτίρια αντίστοιχα graffiti, τα οποία τα βλέπει πάρα πολλοί κόσμος και είναι πολύ σημαντικό γιατί μπορούν ξαφνικά να φαντάζονται ένα πολύ διαφορετικό κόσμο, ένα διαφορετικό μοντέλο της αστυνομίας.
Last thing real quick before you get to other questions is there's tons of graffiti as you see. What you see right now is nothing compared to what it was the first few days because everybody used, you know, the wood to board up their windows, and a ton of people actually ended up doing some incredible graffiti everywhere throughout the city. And so there's efforts now by Minnesota's only African American museum, who we've also, Unicorn Riot has done a special on them. They're called Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. They, MAHMG, the History Museum, is going to be working with people to get a lot of these boards to coalesce them into a museum exhibit. So they'll save the art.
Η πόλη, λέει, Minneapolis έχει γεμίσει με γραφίτι αυτόν τον καιρό και αυτά που είδαμε τώρα δεν είναι τίποτα σε σύγκριση με όλο αυτό που υπήρχε. Υπάρχει ένα μουσείο αφρικανικής ιστορίας στην πόλη, το οποίο σχεδιάζουν να βγάλουν κάποια στιγμή όλα αυτά τα γράφητα και να τα μεταφέρουν εκεί, έτσι ώστε να μείνει ως ένα κομμάτι της ιστορίας της πόλης.
We got some questions here from some people that are with us. I'm gonna tell it to you. First of all, one thing that a person that watches here said is that what you said was not 1/10 of what mainstream media said. This is not a question. And the first question, there are two, is about the demand for defunding the police. At the end, how radical is this demand and how is this demand going to change anything? So let's say we defund the police. Are these funds gonna go to the National Guard? So, yeah, what do you think about this? And after I ask you the second question.
Can you say the question?
Yeah, and I'm gonna translate it. Η πρώτη ερώτηση είναι σε περίπτωση που αποχρηματοδοτηθεί η αστυνομία, ας πούμε, πάρουν τις χρηματοδοτήσεις. Πού θα πάνε αυτές οι χρηματοδοτήσεις? Μήπως θα πάνε δηλαδή, γιατί η Αμερική έχει πολλές διαφορετικές αστυνομίες. Θα πάνε στην εθνοκορά,
Και πόσο ριζοσπαστικό είναι.
Ναι, και πόσο ριζοσπαστικό είναι στην τελική αυτό το αίτημα για την αποχρηματοδότηση.
Thanks for doing translations. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what people are grappling with. It's like, well, okay, so the politicians, the city council came out and all promised to dismantle the police department. They backed down on that promise, and then they made a charter that allows for the laws to change, to take away all of the power from the police, or not all of the power, take away some of the power from the police and utilize that to a new community policing or violence prevention strategy or whatever they would want to call it. But right now, it looks like a renaming of the police department. It doesn't, like you said, like the question comes in very clear, because that's sort of what's happening. It's they have these ideas, but then they've watered down the ideas of radicalness, and it's now just like the root idea of maybe we can take some more money out. But again, like they just had the budget meeting, and they gave 193 million to the police, 193 million, but they only took out 1.5 million, and that is going to go to community groups. But out of the big budget, they cut a bunch of money out of the community groups. So people are really grappling with how to move forward with this political system, because it seems like you can have people in these spots that are progressive, as I keep saying, but they don't seem to be making the moves that progressive people want.
Αυτό είναι κάτι που προβληματίζει πάρα πολύ τον κόσμο, γιατί παρότι και το Δημοτικό Συμβούλιο είχαν πει ότι θα αποκλειστεί η αστυνομία, θα αποχρηματοδοτηθεί, παρόλα αυτά κόψανε μόνο 1,5 εκατομμύριο και πήραν 193. Βγάλανε σε κάποια στιγμή ένα διάγραμμα με διαφορετικούς και με νόμους που θα μπορούσαν να περαστούν, έτσι ώστε κάποιες αρμοδιότητες της αστυνομίας να φύγουν από την αστυνομία και να πάνε σε άλλα κομμάτια. Αλλά αυτό που λέει είναι ότι στο τέλος υπάρχει πιθανότητα απλά να αλλάξει όνομα η αστυνομία, να μην το λέμε αστυνομία, να το λέμε κάτι άλλο. Ενώ υπήρχαν διάφορες σκέψεις και ενώ τα άτομα που είναι σε πολιτικές θέσεις στη Μινεάπολη είναι άτομα προοδευτικά, φαίνεται ότι είναι πολύ δύσκολο να γίνει εν τέλει μια τέτοια αλλαγή. Και δεν ξέρω πώς μπορεί να είναι.
So just real quick, I'll also add that I think that when it comes to defunding the police, a lot of people have problems with what are they going to do without an alternative. And because there's no specific alternative that's been named and put forth as like the concrete idea, then really people are scared to get rid of the police, because part of it because of the state narration, and they continue to tell that crime is going up and you have to have the police. But also part of it is the reality that people need some kind of safety net. Right now in America, with coronavirus, people are really struggling. People are going to be evicted soon, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be any kind of a fun time in the rest of 2020. And so it seems like that's what people are sort of pushing against some of the abolishing of the police, because they don't want the police to just go and then nothing to be in their place. That's what I've heard. So yeah, I'll let you translate that. And then I have one more thing to add.
Λέει ότι πολλοί κόσμος φοβάται και όλες εάν καταργηθεί η αστυνομία, δεν υπάρχει κάποια σαφής εναλλακτική, δεν υπάρχει κάτι σαφές που προτάθηκε και δεν θέλουν να φύγει η αστυνομία και να μην μείνει τίποτα στη θέση της. Υπάρχει και όλη αυτή η αφήγηση του κράτους με το έγκλημα και ποιος θα μας προστατεύσει, θέλουν κάποιο δίκτυο ασφαλείας. Και με τον κορονοϊό τώρα νιώθουν ανασφάλεια και φαίνεται ότι θα υπάρχουν και πολλές εξώσεις, οπότε ο κόσμος έχει ένα φόβο και το να καταργηθεί η αστυνομία σίγουρα προκαλεί ανασφάλεια. Εφόσον δεν υπάρχει κάποιο συγκεκριμένο δομημένο πλάνο.
I think in general, when people are talking about the next moves, I think what I've been hearing is the community needs to have a space to really discuss with itself how to best create an alternative. Because right now, the only people having these meetings are people that are put into those spots or have put themselves into those spots, meaning that the rest of the community doesn't really have access to these meeting spaces. So that's the last bit of it, yeah.
Αυτό που ακούει από τους ανθρώπους είναι ότι χρειάζεται να έχει η κοινότητα ένα μέρος στο οποίο να μπορεί να συζητήσουν μεταξύ τους, να συζητήσουν τέτοια θέματα, να σκεφτούν μια τέτοια εναλλακτική, γιατί σε αυτή τη συγκυρία Αυτοί που είναι σε θέσεις που το συζητάνε, ο κόσμος δεν έχει πρόσβαση σε αυτές τις διαδικασίες, στα συμβούλια κτλ. Οπότε αυτό που θέλουν είναι να έχουν ένα μέρος για να μπορούν να συζητήσουν τι θα γίνει.
Yeah. Is there any other questions for that or any parts?
Yeah, let me get to
And by the way, I'm driving over to the George Floyd site right now. That's what I'm doing in the car.
Μέρος, οδηγώντας στο μέρος που σκοτώθηκε, δολοφονήθηκε ο George Floyd.
It's the second question of the same person, and it regards because he himself was present at the LA 92 riots in his puberty. He's sitting here with us, and what he I wasn't there. Okay, I got it wrong. He's seen pictures in his puberty. Okay. And the pictures he's seen, he says, were much harsher, like real hard, violent pictures. You know, everybody has seen it, I think, from LA 92. And the question is if the situation in Minneapolis after the murder of George Floyd was somehow the same quality.
Yeah. Do you want to do the translation?
Yes.
Of that into Greek? Okay.
Η ερώτηση είναι αν τα επίπεδα, γιατί όλοι έχουμε δει πάρα πολύ σκληρές εικόνες από τα επεισόδια στο LA το 92 και η ερώτηση εδώ από το κοινό είναι αν υπήρξαν παρόμοιες εικόνες τόσο σκληρές και στη Μινεάπολης μετά τη δολοφονία του George Floyd. Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, that's a really, I'm glad you bring that up. Thank you for that question. There was multiple people in the streets while things were burning, comparing what they were seeing to the 92 riots in LA. I think there's a main difference though. You go ahead and translate that and then I'll do the difference.
Ότι υπάρχει μεγάλη διαφορά. Υπάρχει σίγουρα πολλοί κόσμος που είδε τις εξεγέρσεις του 92 στο Λος Άντζελες, αλλά υπάρχει μεγάλη διαφορά με αυτό που συνέβη τώρα στη Μινεάπολη.
I think the biggest difference was LA riots was a lot more race-based, meaning that a lot of like white people were getting beat up. A lot of Asian people were getting beat up. And this one, I did see some white people get beat up, only because they were white presenting. But I saw way more people come together, and they all came together under one enemy or one against one force, and that was the police.
Λέγεται στο 92 στο Λος Άντζελες ήταν πιο φιλετικά μεγαλύτερη διαχωρισμός. Ότι εκεί υπήρχαν και λευκοί, υπήρχαν και Ασιάτες, αλλά τώρα είδε στη Μινεάπολη πιο πολύ κόσμο να σφυρώνεται και ενάντια σε ένα κοινό εχθρό που ήταν η αστυνομία.
Ήταν ο διαχωρισμός πολύ πιο σαφής, δηλαδή έβλεπες να τρώνε ξύλο και λευκοί και Ασιάτες, αλλά σε αυτή την περίπτωση βρήκανε τον κοινό εχθρό και ήρθανε μαζί, ας πούμε.
So I think, just real quick to touch off of that too, you know, there was another difference in that, you know, LA is a way bigger city than Minneapolis and St. Paul combined. So there's that aspect, and also that in LA, that was one of the first videos that became viral in the new era, and that was another impetus, another real push behind LA becoming so big. This, you know, it's almost comparable on the level of like the video being so bad, like a snuff film that racists will probably watch and love to watch over and over and over. But we also had, like as I was saying, the unemployment, the coronavirus, people in the streets, and combine that with one of the worst murders they've ever seen on TV, then, you know, that's comparative. There's a whole bunch of comparables, but I think that LA might, in my opinion, I wasn't there, but LA might have been a grander scale and much deeper, bigger and deeper. And this was you know, something that happened here, but then also spread. I wasn't aware of how far it spread until I was able to actually, like a week later, like, holy shit. I really looked at the internet and I was like, wow, this is everywhere. You know, they're even right in Minneapolis in Greece. So that was pretty amazing.
Λέει δύο διαφορές σε σχέση με το Los Angeles. Σημαίνει ότι το Los Angeles καταρχήν είναι πολύ μεγαλύτερη πόλη. Πιο μεγάλη και από τη Μινεάπολη και το Σιμπόλ, ήταν οι άλλοι. Οπότε και εκεί ήταν, λέει, επίσης από το βίντεο στο Los Angeles το 92 ήταν από τα πρώτα βίντεο σε μια νέα εποχή εξεγέρσεων. Οπότε έχει ένα πιο μεγαλειώδες αντίκτυπο σε σχέση με τη Μινεάπολης. Αλλά αυτό που συνέβη στη Μινεάπολης είναι ότι παρότι ήταν μικρή πόλη και υπήρχε, ας πούμε, αναβρασμός εκεί και λόγω και άλλων συνθηκών, ανεργία, κορονοϊού και αυτή την φρικτή δολοφονία που πλέον είναι τόσο διαδεδομένα τέτοια βίντεο στο ίντερνετ που θα μπορούσε κάποιος ρατσιστής να τη βλέπει και να γουστάρει τα snap βίντεο, ότι παρότι ήταν πιο μικρό το κέντρο, εξαπλώθηκε πολύ γρήγορα. Και ο ίδιος λέει ότι μια εβδομάδα μετά κατάλαβε πόσο αντίκτυπο είχε αυτό σε άλλα μέρη και ότι ακόμα και εδώ στην Ελλάδα είχαμε διαμαρτυρίες για το Floyd.
Real quick, I don't know if you all were able to see that balloons over there in the last block, but those balloons were in front of where a person was killed the other day. They were shot and killed in front of in that corner store. So there has been a lot of sort of violence, community violence that's been happening, and in my opinion, that comes from the trauma that's bestowed on people in these communities where they see a death like George Floyd, and then they see the reaction by the government. And it's a lot of trauma in that. And I feel like every place and every time you look at St. Louis, you look at Baltimore, you look at the other uprisings in the last 5-10 years here in Minneapolis or in America, and you'll see community violence spike right after the uprising. And I think that's a psychological impact. In fact, where people are talking about some of that money that they defund from the police, if they ever do, it needs to go to mental health treatment and mental health facilities.
Δεν υπάρχουν, εγώ δεν τα βλέπω, δεν ξέρω αν τα βλέπει κάποιος, κάτι μπαλόνια εκεί στο δρόμο, τα οποία είναι σε ένα μέρος που σκοτώθηκε και κάποιος άλλος πριν κάποιες μέρες και υπάρχει γενικά μεγάλη αύξηση στη βία στην περιοχή, στην κοινότητα και αυτό ίδιος το αποδίδει στο τραύμα, ότι τέτοια γεγονότα και τέτοιες εξεγέρσεις μετά αφήνουν ένα μεγάλο τραύμα στην κοινότητα και το έχει παρατηρήσει και στο Σεν Λούις και στην Βαλτιμόρη μετά από εξεγέρσεις, ότι αυξάνει πάρα πολύ η εγκληματικότητα και η βία στην κοινότητα και θεωρεί ότι ακόμα και αν αποχρηματοδοτηθεί η αστυνομία αυτό το 1,5 εκατομμύριο που τους κόψανε, ότι θα πρέπει να δοθεί σε οργανισμούς ή σε δομές ψυχικής υγείας, έτσι ώστε να μπορέσουν να αντιπαλεύσουν αυτό το τραύμα που υπάρχει στην κοινότητα.
So I'm 2 blocks away from the site, and I had to go around through an alley because they're actually painting a street over there. So it's a lot of it's always something new over here. It's always actions happening, and within that, there's I'll bring I'll try to describe everything when we get up there. But also, here's another spot where we're 2 blocks over on 35th in Chicago. Here's a spot on 37th and Elliott where more balloons are put up, and these balloons are for another person who was killed, shot and killed by community violence.
Και αυτά τώρα είναι 2 τετράγωνα από το μνημείο και αυτά τα μπαλόνια είναι για κάποιον άλλον που επίσης σκοτώθηκε και τα έχουν αφήσει. Is this common that do you set up balloons, not you, but whenever they're killed?
Yeah, there's like different vigils, the way that people handle different vigils. Sometimes it's flowers, sometimes it's like pictures, other times it's balloons. They usually will find the tree So they'll usually find a tree that's really close to the person, that's like a living thing, and they'll allow that tree to continue to, you know, bring life to the person or celebrate the person through that tree because it's living. And also, yeah, it's just like something to memorialize that person for their life and where they took their last breaths.
Λέει για αυτά τα μπαλονάκια, το ρώτησε αν τα αφήνουν εκεί ως ένα μνημείο συνήθως και λέει ναι, συνήθως αφήνουν ή λουλούδια ή μπαλονάκια ή κάποιο δέντρο σαν έτσι ένα μνημείο για τον άνθρωπο που άφησε εκεί την τελευταία του πνοή.
So you see people have used barricades here for hard blockades of the roads, and they left one open. That's a recent thing where people are leaving parts of this open. There was hard barricaded everywhere on all the corners, and now it's a lot changed. You know, you see, well, I'll try to bring you through this, but yeah, definitely come up with any questions you have as well. I'll take them.
Πριν μας έδειξε τα οδοφράγματα και έλεγε ότι είχε σε πάρα πολλά σημεία, τώρα τα έχουν ανοίξει λίγο.
So the other question is, how long are they going to keep this area blocked off? Some of the politicians want it open. And you see, this is Breonna Taylor. So it's not just about George Floyd. You see, this is Mike Brown. They were both, Breonna Taylor was killed in Louisville while she was in her house during the police on a no-knock raid. And then Mike Brown, you might probably already know from Ferguson, he was killed. Here's a really cool artist piece. This was already done before this happened. This is like this corner has got a lot of history here on 38th in Chicago, and it's historically a black neighborhood. It's getting gentrified a little bit more and more every day, but
είναι γειτονιά μαύρων και το γκράφιτι που είδαμε πριν ήταν προγενέστερο, αυτό το μαύρο. Και λέει ότι έχει πολλή ιστορία αυτή η γειτονιά, πολύ καιρό τώρα. So is this the spot?
Nope, I'll bring you over to the spot in 1 second. This is the spot where they did the beautiful mural though. So this is the intersection, 38th in Chicago, and you see they have like a rope with flowers and different pictures, and they have created a garden in the middle of the street.
Έχουν φτιάξει ένα κήπο στη μέση του δρόμου. Νωρίτερα είπε ότι οι πολιτικοί θέλουν να ανοίξει αυτό το σημείο. Είναι ερώτημα το πότε ο κόσμος θα άρει τα οδοφράγματα και θα υπάρχει κανονικά κίνηση εκεί πέρα. Προς το παρόν είναι ακόμα κλειστά.
How you doing?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm on a stream with some Greek comrades right now.
Oh, nice.
You want to say hi?
Sure. Hey, what's up?
Hey, all right. I'll talk to you soon, all right? So basically, yeah, you see this part, this is a big fist that was raised, and then you have these sort of cones that are here, and then you have the information sort of booth there, and this is where he took his last breaths.
Εδώ είναι το σημείο που πέθανε. So, do people keep coming in daily to leave a flower, or?
Yes, every single day, every night, there's people here gathering. There's a whole bunch of donations that come. Everything has changed, you know, though. So in the beginning, it was filled with people everywhere. There was tables set up. They were handing out free food. They were handing out produce. They were handing out clothes. You know, again, it's a lot of people are struggling with coronavirus, and the people became the protectors. The people with all the donations became what the state couldn't become, and that was somebody that was looking out for them.
Ρώτησα αν έρχεται ακόμα κόσμος και λέει ότι ναι, κάθε μέρα έρχονται και τα βράδια. Στην αρχή βέβαια υπήρχε πολύ περισσότερος κόσμος που άφηνε και προϊόντα, φαγητά, ρούχα για άλλο κόσμο στην κοινότητα και ότι και μέσα στον κορονοϊό που δυσκολεύονταν πάρα πολύ οικονομικά, ότι η κοινότητα έγινε αυτό που το κράτος δεν μπορούσε να γίνει.
So real quick, this is the store that called the police on him. They called the police on him for a suspected $20 bill that was counterfeit. His car was parked right over here. And so the police actually did some actions over here. They moved him out of the car. They put him over here, just put him in the police car, and that's where they put the knee on him, was right over here underneath that tent area.
Λέει ήταν το αυτοκίνητο εκεί που έδειξε προηγουμένως και τον πήραν το αυτοκίνητο και τον έσυραν εδώ σε αυτό το σημείο.
And so a real quick thing about this corner store is that a lot of people have said it is exploiting the Black neighborhood for a long time, and that it's run by Arab folk that they feel that aren't for the Black community. Okay. Yeah. So here at Cub Foods, basically the community has said that that store in itself has preyed upon the Black community and expropriated money from them because they don't sell good goods, they sell bad goods, and there's a lot of things that happen in that store. And also the store owner is like, people say that he's a pedophile.
Oh, okay. Λέει το κατάστημα αυτό, το Cup Foods που ήταν πίσω από το μνημείο, έχει πλέον πολύ κακό όνομα. Ο κόσμος λέει ότι τα προϊόντα που πουλάει δεν είναι καλά και ότι έχει πάρει πάρα πολλά χρήματα από την κοινότητα. Έχουν συμβεί διάφορα άσχημα πράγματα εκεί μέσα και υπάρχει μια φήμη ότι ο ιδιοκτήτης είναι παιδόφιλος.
And then so this is a long list. This is just this four, and there's a long list of names, and it just goes all the way down the block of everybody who was killed by the police. And yeah, like you had asked, do people come here? Yes, there's tons of people who just come here, they just show up, and they just come here to pay respects, but also in the beginning, they were coming here to take pictures and then take that selfie and then leave. Some of those people were doing that. And the people that are sticking with it, they're still here.
Λέει, αυτή είναι μια λίστα από ανθρώπους που δολοφονήθηκαν από αστυνομικούς και έρχεται πάρα πολλοί κόσμος να υποβάλει τα σέβη του. Βέβαια υπάρχει και κόσμος που απλά έρχεται για να βγάλει τη selfie του στο μέρος και να φύγει. Αλλά πάρα πολλοί κόσμος περνάει και για να... σαν μνημείο γενικότερα για άτομα που έφυγαν λόγω αστυνομικής βίας. That's a really long list.
What's that?
It's a really long list.
My gosh, and it's not even a fourth. There's 1,000 people killed by the police every year here in America. 1,000.
In the whole state, right? Not just the area.
All of the states, yep. The whole country. I'll bring you down to the vigil site too. There's a makeshift graveyard. Bring you down there as well. There's a lot of murals on that building too. I hope it's still here. I haven't been down here. All right, good. So there's a lot of art. A lot of artists have done a lot of their things, and so here you see sort of even like a map, right? We were just right here, basically. Now we're sort of down here, and we're gonna go to this memorial cemetery.
Για το μέρος στο οποίο βρισκόμασταν. Ήμασταν εκεί που έδειχνε η γροθιά. Τώρα αυτό με τα ονόματα ήταν το Say Their Names Memorial.
Yep. You even know it's a Say Their Names Memorial. Oh yeah, it said it. Okay. I was like, wait, how do you know that?
It was on the map. We have one question.
Γιατί με τον Floyd, βλέπω τώρα τεράστιο κατάστημα. Τι ήταν αυτό που έκανε μια συσσόρευση αγανάκτησης και αυτά κάτι ξεβαστεί.
Okay, one question that we have is why this time? Why with Floyd? I mean, you have a great, really long list there of names of people who were murdered. So why now? Was it just pent-up frustration? Was it other factors that led to an uprising now? Why not before? What's different this time?
That's a really good question. I went out and I was realizing in the street while I was in there that so many people I had never seen before, and I've been covering these things for 5-10 years. And I think really what happened was the video was so shocking to people. A lot of people still really didn't believe that these types of things were happening. And because the video was so shocking to people, I think that it was that part, along with sort of like this idea of, well, shit, I have to do something about it. Along with like really just being sick and fed up of this. This is happening all the time. The people aren't really reacting in ways that'll make a change, obviously. And so I think when it boiled down to it, to add in the coronavirus, to add in how people didn't have sports to watch, they didn't have much entertainment to watch. They weren't, you know, they weren't comfortable anymore. And with you know, without school, without corona, without working, and without entertainment, that's what happened essentially. Like people, when they're not so bogged down into living so comfortably and into their own little circle life, then I think that like these things can be, you know, we can see things that'll exact change. And so I think that had everything to do with it. Also, you know, I think the video was so rough. It was so bad. Derek Chauvin just sort of sitting there looking at the screen. It was so bad. And I think people were just like, wow. You know, there's a lot of people that I know that they were not activated. They weren't political. They didn't care about this stuff. They respected like what people did, but they just weren't into it. And now people are like protesting every day, or every time there's a protest, people are there. And that's a different thing here in America, to where I hadn't seen that before. It was literally a grassroots movement based off of the police killing somebody. And you know, it's sort of quelled, as we've alluded to. It's quelled down. It's a lot less, but I don't believe it's done. I believe that there's more to come here in probably Minneapolis, and specifically more to come here in the United States. One reason why is because I don't trust that the officers will be convicted, and so I think once the court goes through next March, and maybe even before then, you know, I think that there's going to be new small pieces of uprisings. There's people like Kobe Heisler right here, where he was autistic. His grandma called the police because he was having a mental crisis, and the police came and shot him. He didn't have any guns, you know, and nobody really covered that story right away. I think partly because it wasn't on video. And so like, well, this is the police story and that's all we know. And so because there was also a narrator during that video, that person who was a bystander watching it, he was also narrating what we were seeing, right? And so if you watch that 9-minute video of George Floyd, he was telling them, get off him. He was telling them they can't breathe. He was telling them all of these things. But with him telling that, it also made it more clear in the viewer's mind exactly what was happening. And that was another big part of it, I think. It wasn't just a visual thing, it was an audio thing as well.
Λέει ότι το βασικό ήταν το βίντεο, ότι ήταν το βίντεο τόσο κακό και τόσο άγριο, είχε και αυτός που το τραβούσε, ήταν ένας περαστικός, ο οποίος έλεγε κιόλας, υπήρχε μια αφήγηση, άρα περνούσε πιο έντονα στο μυαλό του θεατή, ότι τους έλεγε δεν αναπνέει, αφήστε τον, και αυτοί δεν κάνανε τίποτα, οι αστυνομικοί. Οπότε σίγουρα ήταν πολύ σοκαριστικό, αλλά λέει σίγουρα έπαιξε ρόλο και ότι ήταν μέσα σε ένα κλίμα ανεργίας, κορονοϊού, που ο κόσμος δεν πήγαινε στη δουλειά, δεν πήγαινε στο σχολείο, δεν υπήρχε ψυχαγωγία, δεν υπήρχαν αθλήματα να δει για να εκτονωθεί. Οπότε, έχοντας βγει από αυτή τη ρουτίνα της καθημερινότητας που συχνά δεν σε αφήνει να δεις και άλλα πράγματα, κάπως έπιασε τον κόσμο ένα συναίσθημα ότι πρέπει κάτι να κάνω γι' αυτό, ότι τώρα πρέπει να δράσω. Ναι, αυτό και μας έδειξε και το Γκόμπι, το οποίο ένας από εδώ, τα μνήματα, που ήταν αυτιστικός και το φώναξε η γιαγιά του την αστυνομία γιατί είχε πάθει κάποια κρίση και δεν είχε όπλα, δεν είχε τίποτα και τον πυροβόλησαν. Και αυτό δεν καλύφθηκε αμέσως. Αλλά στην καθημερινότητα και όσο τρέχουν πολλά πράγματα, ο κόσμος προφανώς δεν μπορούσε να ασχοληθεί. Αλλά τώρα και κόσμος ακόμα που δεν συμμετείχε καθόλου σε κινήματα, μπορεί να είναι κάθε μέρα σε μια διαμαρτυρία.
Can I ask you another question if you are done with the last?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah, the pictures you're showing to us right now, it's something for me I've never seen. It's like a full public social space created by the people. It's something like, I'd say, autonomous zone since, yeah, you know, so how should we imagine this whole, is the daily routine there? How do the people gather? How do the people make assemblies, trying to make institutions in there to take the space for them, that it belongs to the people and not to the state?
Yeah.
I'm going to translate it.
Okay.
Λέω ότι οι εικόνες που μας δείχνει τώρα είναι κάτι που εγώ προσωπικά δεν έχω ξαναδεί. Δηλαδή είναι ένας δημόσιος κοινωνικός χώρος, μια αυτόνομη ζώνη, δεν ξέρω πώς να το πω. Μια πολύ μεγάλη έκταση, άμα είδατε από το χάρτη πριν. Και αυτό που ρώτησα είναι πώς μπορούμε να φανταστούμε την καθημερινότητα εκεί μέσα. Ότι πώς επισκέπτεται ο κόσμος, γίνονται λαϊκές συνελεύσεις, γίνονται συζητήσεις για το πώς αυτό θα μείνει. Δηλαδή πώς μπορούμε εμείς να το φανταστούμε εκεί μέσα. So, okay, I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think there's multiple examples of sort of autonomous zones that have happened in the recent past around this area. And obviously this is one of them. They started by making that space, as you alluded to. People had to secure the space first. And then, here, I'll let you translate and then I'll go.
Λέει ότι υπήρχαν πολλές φορές τα τελευταία χρόνια τέτοιες αυτόνομες ζώνες στην περιοχή. Αρχικά ξεκίνησαν με το ότι έπρεπε να ασφαλίσουν την περιοχή.
So the first 2 days, people were up here at the vigil site, and they were just up here to celebrate him and to memorialize and hold it down. But the police came through and they ran over flowers, and they threatened people, and they shot tear gas grenades at people who were at the site.
Στην αρχή ο κόσμος μαζευόταν γύρω από το μνημείο και άφηνε λουλούδια και ήταν πολύ ειρηνικά. Και μετά ήρθε η αστυνομία και άρχισε να πετάει και να διαλύει τη συγκέντρωση.
And then people had to take the space, and so they used different areas, different ways, different hard blockades, different cars, different concrete barriers. And then with these barriers, it stopped the police from coming through, and also they had talked to the police chief and the deputy chief, who are both black, and they asked them to not have any more incursions on the safe zone. So they called this a sacred space.
Οπότε κάνανε μετά οδοφράγματα, χρησιμοποιούσαν διάφορα πράγματα όπως εδώ τα διαχωριστικά για να κλείσουν τον δρόμο. Και επίσης μίλησαν με τον διευθυντή και τον υποδιευθυντή της αστυνομίας για να τους πούνε να μην μπαίνουν οι αστυνομικοί σε αυτό το χώρο. Αυτό το κατέλαβαν και τον έκλεισαν.
So once they got the space secured, then they sort of took charge of it, and that meant, as you said, creating an autonomous zone. But it sort of had the institutions it needed. It had security, it had the kitchen, it had multiple kitchens, it had multiple medic tents, it had things to do, it had a stage where people could perform. But there was another side of it during the off times when activists weren't activating. There was the church folks that came in, and then they did their thing. And so it was such a wide range of different actors that came out here to play their part.
Αρχικά ασφαλίστηκε, αλλά μετά προσθέθηκαν και άλλα πράγματα. Υπήρχαν πολλές κουζίνες, υπήρχε σκηνή που γίνονταν παραστάσεις και ο κόσμος μπορούσε να δει. Υπήρχαν ιατρικά σημεία, σκηνές.
Security.
Το πρώτο ήταν αυτό, η ασφάλεια. Και μέχρι και εκκλησία υπήρχε που ο κόσμος πήγαινε εκεί.
And so I think that I will say also that, you know, so once people took the space, they developed those sides of it where it was organized, but yet also, and the other side of it is, you know, there was a lot of money, there was a lot of donations that were being brought into Minneapolis, and those donations were fueling the protests, because up here you had people that were intense, or not intense, but like they had shelter on top of, and they had tables. And so they just had tons and tons and tons and tons of different tables that were giving out different foods, and as a giving out, you know, goods that you needed, giving out produce and clothes. But there wasn't, that I'm aware of, there wasn't really a space where people were doing assemblies. And so that's part of, maybe you could say as part of like my thoughts of what could have done better. And you know, if this happened again, to where a lot of these cats, they were talking, like they would talk around circle, you know, in the circle up there, they would talk around it basically. It wasn't looking like that a month or two ago, but people were talking, people were having nightly conversations, people were having their own conversations, but there was never really a specific organized assembly that people were making demands out of.
Λέει ότι υπήρχαν πάρα πολλές δωρεές, οπότε αυτό βοηθούσε τις διαμαρτυρίες να συνεχίζουν, γιατί υπήρχαν πάρα πολλά τραπέζια με φαγητό, ημερούχα, με πράγματα που δίνανε στον κόσμο. Αλλά αυτό που δεν υπήρχε και θα μπορούσαν να το σκεφτούν για το μέλλον, είναι χώρος συγκεκριμένα για συνελεύσεις. Κάνανε ένα κύκλο και μιλούσανε, αλλά δεν υπήρχε οργανωμένος χώρος συγκεκριμένα για αυτές τις διαδικασίες. Οπότε αυτό είναι κάτι που θα μπορούσε να είχε γίνει και καλύτερα.
This goes back to what you said before about creating a space, right? That's what you meant.
Mm-hmm. Yep, this is the space.
For people to meet. Yeah.
Yep. And there was hundreds of thousands of people up here all the time. It's definitely gone down a lot lately. There's also been a lot of shootings that have sort of happened around here. As you saw when we were driving here, it was only a couple blocks away. And this neighborhood is, you know, it's sort of run down a little bit. And as I said, it was getting gentrified. And there's a street organization here, out here, you know, they're the Bloods gang, and they're pretty deep. And when this corner was then all of a sudden turned into a tourist spot, it made things really difficult for them. And so there was different power vacuums that happened. And, you know, it's also part of this capitalism and part of the state response to us, or to the people actually activating itself against the state. And the state basically decided to not help the community anymore. And it already wasn't helping the community, but yet it decided to leave the community alone, give no support, give no resources. And so that's where the community really stepped up to help itself. And some of the security, they even had, you know, different groups, different gangs, different street organizations working as security under a truce, but that didn't last as long as people hoped.
Λέει ότι αυτή η γειτονιά είναι αρκετά παρικμασμένη και είναι σε διαδικασία
I'm talking to Greece right now.
Αυτό το
Greece. And would you want to like briefly say anything?
Οπότε ναι, αυτό που έλεγε είναι ότι και το κράτος μετά δεν βοήθησε την κοινότητα. Τους άφησε μόνος τους, δεν έδινε πόρους. Και αυτό που έκαναν εκείνο το καιρό των διαμαρτυριών να στηρίζει την κοινότητα, την ίδια την κοινότητα.
Και ότι είχαμε και πολλές συμμορίες που είχαν κάνει ανακοχή για εκείνη την περίοδο και είχαν πει μέχρι και στις ομάδες security, αλλά αυτό δεν κράτησε πολύ.
So I'm going to quickly ask this gentleman here to just, hey, do you want to talk about like the garden in itself? What's up with this garden? You said there are rescue plants?
Yeah, this garden, I built it, designed it, and it's based off of, you can look up Merkaba or 432 hertz. This is hertz of healing. What we did was we designed it point where people could come and versus focus on the pain that happened, but take away the healing. Because when some things are recovering from death, they give off healing. And so what we did was I'm a builder, so I brought all the wood and dirt and extra that we had and brought together. Why? Because the people were wanting the street to be named, and we have something that can be solid forever. And I did my best, and we all came together. I brought flowers I could, other folks brought them, and that's it. And so what I do is I make sure that I come by and make sure that they're doing well, and they're doing wonderful, just like the rest of the world. And so, God bless you all in Greece, and, with perfect health and healing. We don't need all our presidents to say, oh, no more war, but we as a people have that power to say peace and to declare peace. And the way we do that is you matter. It's like, that's why I stopped. He said, the people in Greece, you matter. That's it. And when you get a chance to see someone that's not like where you're from to speak to, you matter. Meaning that your dreams matter, your hopes matter, your family matter, your children, your breath matters. So God bless you and thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you.
Οπότε αυτός, από ό,τι κατάλαβα καλά, φρόντιζε τον κήπο εκεί πέρα αυτό. Το έκανε σαν διαδικασία επούλωσης. Πράγμα σε εκείνο το μέρος και με τον κήπο ήθελε να δώσει έτσι ένα χαρακτήρα επούλωσης και μας χαιρέτησε και εμάς εδώ στην Ελλάδα και μας είπε ότι αυτό που έχει σημασία είναι ότι ο κάθε άνθρωπος μετράει, οι ελπίδες σας μετράνε, τα όνειρά σας μετράνε, οι ανάσες σας μετράνε και ότι οι άνθρωποι όλοι μαζί έχουν τη δύναμη να κάνουν πράγματα όταν είναι μαζί.
Yeah. So yeah, you see, that's I'm glad we were able to run into him. Yep.
Unicorn Riot, all right.
Hey, sweet. Thank you. Appreciate it. Niko, what's your name?
Eric.
Eric. Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So even right down the street is used. I don't know if you can see it in your screen, but there's like a contraption that says Mayday on the bottom of it. And there's during May Day here in Minneapolis, there's a huge gathering, and we didn't have it this year. Not because of coronavirus, but because of May Day itself. It was like the people who were organizing it needed a year off after 20 some years. And so that's one of the contraptions that local anarchists had created. And it's actually a skate dome. I can't remember what it's called. Like, it's called a specific name, but I'll bring you down to it. We filmed it before. And so if you ever want to see this in use, type in like Unicorn Riot and May Day, Minneapolis May Day onto the computer, and you'll be able to find some of it.
So you said this is a safe home.
So for this piece, this is totally separate than the George Floyd thing. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but this is just like, I saw it over here, so I felt like I had to bring you all to it because it's like a float for a parade, but it's an anarchist float where they use a skateboard on top of it, and there's fire coming off of it, and it's just pretty radical. So I just wanted to show it to you all.
Άρμα, έτσι, σαν άρμα παρέλαση, το οποίο το χρησιμοποιούν την πρωτομαγιά που έχει αναγράφει κιόλας Mayday, το οποίο είναι μεγάλη γιορτή στη Μινεάπολη, κάθε χρόνο τη γιορτάζουν.
Yeah, so anyways, that has nothing to do with George Floyd, but it's like...
George Floyd, απλά το είδε εκεί και είπε να μας το δείξει. Very nice of you.
Yeah.
You take us sightseeing.
Yep. There's a lot to see here. Let me show you it all. No, yeah, is there any more questions?
Έχουμε άλλες ερωτήσεις, παιδιά, να κάνουμε όχι, θες εσύ. Okay. Yeah, we have one question, and is specifically about
health and mental health. If you can tell us something about how the people organize there concerning these two issues, health and mental health, during the uprising or before, maybe some processes, or now?
Yeah, it's not really prevalent. You know, it's a thing that needs to be worked on more. It's a thing that is lacking. It's not something that we can readily find. You can't readily find a group automatically to just be like, yo, all right, can I go talk to you all? Can you all give me resources? It's tougher. It's tougher to find that because it's mental health, and mental health is sort of stigmatized in a lot of bad ways. And so I specifically don't know too much about it. I know that people were talking about creating better organizations, better support groups, but I don't know. I haven't seen it. So that's a really good question. It needs to be done. There is psychologists and other counselors that are in the movement that are trying to help people, but it's not on any kind of mass scale at all. And it's definitely still being overlooked, I think, in a lot of ways. So it's a really good question, and something that's not really, you know, it's a lot of people have mental health issues, and it's only getting worse, and it's getting exacerbated with this uprising and then coronavirus and then the trauma. And, you know, that's something that's definitely worrisome for the future.
Ναι, λέει ότι υπήρχε έλλειψη σε τέτοιες δομές, ότι δεν ήταν εύκολο να στηθεί και ειδικά σε ό,τι έχει να κάνει με την ψυχική υγεία και το στίγμα δεν ήταν εύκολο να έχουν τέτοιες δομές και τον ανησυχεί γιατί και με τις συνθήκες αυτές και με την εξέγερση με τον κορονοϊό ότι χρειάζονται τέτοιες δομές, χρειάζεται να υπάρχει στήριξη στην κοινότητα.
Παρατήρησε αν το διάρκεια του uprising υπήρξε και περισσότερη συμμετοχή, ενδιαφέρον και συμμετοχή του κόσμου.
The other part about it is a lot of people. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, a follow-up question was that did you notice that during the uprising, the community bonded? Was there more willingness from the people who participate to discuss mental health issues?
Yes, there's definitely discussions that happen for sure. The follow-through I've not seen, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. But in specific protests, like there's a person, Marquise Armstrong, who's basically an organizer with Racial Justice Network, but also he is. Oh, you're going to the other garden? Oh, word? Okay, I'll film you a little bit. Oh, okay. He's talking about he also created that garden, and he's gonna go get some water to water it. But I hadn't actually talked to him before, so that was good. I've seen him around here, but I hadn't actually like interviewed him. So it was cool to have an interview with you all on the line too. But no, I think that in general, back to mental health, you know, people talked about it. There's people like Marquise Armstrong, who's a mental health practitioner, who's been talking about it. He's also been helping a lot of the families that have lost loved ones to police killings. But I haven't and he's got his own little company, but I haven't seen it like enacted on a movement scale. And so that's what I'm hoping to see actually. And personally, I'm hoping to see that. I think people are working on it, but I'm not sure. You know, it's a really good question. It really needs to be having a lot of attention, but there's not much attention being made on it right now.
Είναι πολύ καλή ερώτηση, ότι σίγουρα συζητήθηκε αυτό πολύ, αλλά δεν προέκυψε κάτι πολύ συγκεκριμένο ή δομημένο. Υπήρχαν επαγγελματίες που μεμονωμένα φρόντιζαν οικογένειες που είχαν χάσει κόσμο, αλλά όχι σε μορφή κινήματος ή δομημένης παρέμβασης.
Yeah, so like literally it was about right here where he took his last breaths. You can sort of see his body painted. And that painting like looks like it's moving, it's going up to heaven, you know, in a way, sort of rising up, some wings on it.
Εδώ έχουν ζωγραφίσει το σώμα του George Floyd και φαίνεται έτσι λίγο σαν να κινείται, έχει αριστερά από πίσω.
You see different spiritual elements left behind, crosses and Buddha.
Διαφορετικές θρησκείες έχουν αφήσει διάφορα στο μνημείο.
Okay, there is also one last question, and after we can close the session, if it's okay,
Okay.
for. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Okay, the question is that do you agree that maybe what prompted the whole movement at the specific time were the words, the last words of Floyd, who said that I can breathe, that many people identified with these words. You know, it has many different readings. People cannot breathe in many ways now. So could it be that also the words themselves gave yes, and it has a universal meaning around the globe. I mean, it's something that people could identify with globally.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with that. And I think that also him saying mama and reaching out for his mama had everything to do with everything too. You know, that really everybody can, you know, relate to calling out for their mom. And if you're a grown man and you're calling out for your mom, something really is drastic is happening. And a lot of people recognize that. And I think that when it comes down to that part about breathing and about calling out for your mom, and even being so polite as he was, please, officer, please. Yeah, and it was 9 minutes of it, you know, and 9 minutes of it also being narrated by the person next to him, where if it was just the video, it might not have been even as powerful. But yeah, I think that, you know, everything, George's whole reaction during the situation definitely accentuated and pushed forward the movement. You know, it's funny, there's people who think that the officers were paid actors and that George Floyd's death was a hoax. And it's just like, people will do anything to not believe things, you know? But yeah, I think that what the question was very on point with the idea of the language being used by George Floyd was surely relatable across the globe.
Λέει ότι σίγουρα η γλώσσα που χρησιμοποίησε ήταν κάτι που μπορούσε να ταυτιστεί ο καθένας και ακόμα και αυτό το τι φώναξε, ζητούσε την μαμά του, είναι κάτι με το οποίο σοκάρισε και το οποίο ο καθένας μπορεί να ταυτιστεί. Ένας ενήλικος άνδρας για να ζητάει τη μητέρα του σημαίνει ότι κάτι πολύ σοβαρό συμβαίνει και το ότι ήταν έτσι πολύ ευγενικός και 9 λεπτά από όλο αυτό ήταν κάτι πολύ σοκαριστικό, μαζί με την αφήγηση, παρότι λέει ότι υπήρχε κόσμος που αμφισβητούσε, έλεγε ότι ήταν απάτη το βίντεο, ότι ήταν ηθοποιοί, οι αξιωματικοί, οι αστυνόμοι και ότι δεν έγινε ποτέ αυτό. Θα κάναν τα πάντα για να μην το πιστέψουν ότι συνέβη. Ήταν κάτι με το οποίο ο καθένας μπορούσε να ταυτιστεί και να σοκαριστεί.
And yeah, Eric Garner, who shocked the world with he said it in 2014 when he was getting killed by the police with the chokehold. He said, I can't breathe. And so this was definitely was 6 years later, and it definitely sparked everything that George Floyd, everything that Eric Garner sparked and more.
Και δεν ήταν η πρώτη φορά που κάποιος δολοφονήθηκε λέγοντας ότι δεν μπορώ να αναπνεύσω. Ήδη το 2014 έγινε αυτό, 6 χρόνια μετά συνέχιζε το ίδιο πράγμα, οπότε...
Yeah, I mean, so the last things I would say is that there was a lot of money that was donated to the cause. A lot of that money went into a bail fund, and then to a group called Black Visions Collective, and like millions and millions and millions of dollars. And while, you know, a lot of people are still super struggling. And so I'm hoping that in the future, with these millions of dollars, that people will be able to, you know, bring that back to the community in a lot of ways that'll benefit the community and bring forth the expected and the demanded changes, because essentially that money was not for a one-off. That money was to make a difference, from a lot of people donating, from celebrities to anybody else. And so it was really interesting to see all that, but it was also, it's sort of troubling in a way, because it's like you hope, you just sort of hope that people will abide by the manners of which they should abide by when it comes to the community and being a community member and protecting the community and bringing forth change in the community.
Υπήρχαν λέει, πάρα πολλές ωραίες όλο αυτόν τον καιρό από πάρα πολύ κόσμο. Συγκεντρώθηκαν πάρα πολλά χρήματα, κάποια από αυτά δόθηκαν για εγγυήσεις. Κάποια άλλα πήρε η Black Vision. Και αυτά τα χρήματα όντως θα μείνουν στην κοινότητα, γιατί υπάρχει πολλοί κόσμος που δυσκολεύεται και θα χρησιμοποιηθούν έτσι ώστε να διοργανωθεί η κοινότητα.
Okay, we would like to thank you very much for this whole presentation, the whole trip you took us with you.
Totally.
Yeah, it's like vlogging.
Yeah. This picture we've never seen them in any video, so thank you very much. And I hope everybody that watched it or was here with us is also happy about this. And we're gonna be in contact for sure and in the future, so that we exchange more after this.
Yeah, totally, anytime. And thank you all for inviting me, and thank you for coming along on the trip. This is Minneapolis, you know, it's like, we'll see what happens out of this. You know, it was the biggest uprising I've ever seen, and it was the biggest momentum that I'd ever seen any community come forth with. But yet I did see the political posturing and the political statements of will, but then how they disregarded that will very quickly. And so it's going to be, yeah, you know, like I'd be down to do an update on this next year or 6 months from now, because it's going to be a continual story. And basically what I think that the movements can learn from this is how grassroots organizing can just take effect, and how, as I heard in 2018, when I was at the tenure for Alexis, people weren't really ready for the next steps from what I heard. Like they were ready for the revolution, they were ready for the uprising, but the next steps, it was sort of lacking. And that's sort of what we're facing here as well. We had this uprising, we had the youth out on the streets, and now the next steps are up to the political world, and that's not a viable solution. And so that's, I guess that's my last words. And thank you so much for having me on. It's really appreciated. And, you know, obviously coming from my family in Greece, you know, it means something to me. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll be in contact. See you soon.
Ναι.
All right. Check out our media, unicornriot.ninja. We got a lot of Greek pieces.
Έλεγε ότι θα δείξει τώρα πώς θα πάει εκεί. Αυτός θα κάνει ένα update σε 6 μήνες, ένα χρόνο. Αυτό που φάνηκε είναι ότι υπήρχε διάθεση από τον κόσμο και πολύ οργή και υπήρχε μεγάλη ροπή προς το να υπάρχει κάποια αλλαγή. Αλλά η λύση αυτή τη στιγμή είναι στα χέρια πολιτικών και αυτό δεν είναι καθόλου βιώσιμο. Και το συγκρίνει με αυτό που συζητούσα στην Ελλάδα το 2018, στην επέτειο, όχι, για τα 10 χρόνια του Αλέξη. Και έλεγε ότι τότε λέγανε ότι ο κόσμος ήταν έτοιμος για κάτι άλλο, αλλά δεν υπήρχαν σαφείς εναλλακτικές. Και αυτό είναι ακριβώς αυτό που τους λείπει και τώρα εκεί πέρα. Γιατί το να αφήσεις το επόμενο βήμα στους πολιτικούς, συνήθως δεν υπάρχει βούληση και δεν αλλάζουν.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
All right, bye everybody.
Ciao.
Bye. Ευχαριστώ. Wait. Ευχαριστώ.
Καλή νύχτα.
Yeah, Kali Nikta. What the heck? Kali Nikta. All right, bye. Ευχαριστώ.